On the day she mocked him at her wedding to her lover, Evelyn Brooks had no idea she was humiliating the one man she should have feared most. She stood beneath the glowing chandeliers, laughing loudly with her guests, completely unaware he owned the company she worked for, blind to the truth that every paycheck she had ever earned came from the quiet man she once dismissed as invisible. And when her new husband wrapped an arm around her waist and joined in the laughter, she never imagined the moment his father revealed his 47B empire, shattering the room like glass. Because when the truth finally hit, when the man she mocked rose from his lonely seat with a calmness that silenced hundreds, what he did next destroyed them all, exposing betrayals, rewiring loyalties, and ripping open a story she never knew she was living in. The Grand Meridian Ballroom shimmered with a kind of wealth that didn't just impress, it intimidated. Gold-leafed pillars, imported marble, chandeliers shaped like frozen galaxies, every guest dripping in diamonds or designer labels. A world Evelyn had chased her entire life, terrified she would slip back into the childhood she had spent years running from. The more the lights shone on her wedding gown, the custom Italian silk embroidered with her initials, the more she felt she'd finally won. And the louder she laughed tonight, the more afraid she was of the small voice inside her that still remembered running from evictions, hiding from debt collectors, and watching her mother cry over bills. But none of that fear showed on her face. Her smile gleamed as cameras flashed. She looked like security and victory wrapped in one perfect bride. She squeezed her new husband Adrian's hand while he flashed his trademark smug grin. The same grin he'd learned from his flashy businessman father, the one who taught him that money made you untouchable. Evelyn clung to that belief with both hands. Then her gaze found Daniel, far corner, alone, wearing a navy suit so quiet it disappeared under the lights. No designer label, no loud presence, no entourage, just stillness. A stillness that unsettled her more than she'd admit. Because somewhere deep under her expensive perfume and borrowed confidence, she remembered how Daniel once smiled at her like she mattered more than her nightmares. She remembered how safe she once felt in his silence, and she hated that memory, so she smothered it. She lifted the mic. Adrian chuckled. "Go on, babe. Give them a show." A brittle laugh escaped her. "Don't worry, I will." She raised her champagne glass toward Daniel. To Daniel, she sweetened, letting her voice drip with sugar. A reminder that not everyone rises in life. Some people stay, well, she let the pause stretch until guests leaned in. Exactly where they belong. Laughter erupted. Champagne flutes clinked. Daniel didn't blink, but there was a flicker, barely perceptible, in the eyes of the tall, silver-haired man standing behind him, the man no one recognized. The man who'd built an empire powerful enough to topple the very hall hosting this wedding. Victor Reed, Daniel's father. Evelyn's laughter sliced through the air again, but Daniel didn't hear the joke. He was watching his father. And his father was watching everything, eyes narrowing with the quiet calculation of a man who'd already decided exactly when the truth would be unleashed. Daniel exhaled slowly. Victor gave a single nod, and the first thread of the wedding began to unravel. The laughter from Evelyn's toast was still echoing when Daniel finally lowered his gaze from his father. The room didn't know it yet, but something had shifted, subtle, invisible, like a hairline crack spreading through glass before it shatters. Evelyn mistook his calm stillness for embarrassment, and the confidence on her face sharpened. She leaned into Adrian's side, whispering loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. He always had that pathetic lost puppy look. Adrian chuckled, smoothing a hand over his tailored suit. "Relax, babe. After tonight, he won't matter to anyone." His voice carried the arrogance of a man who believed the world bent easily for those wearing expensive cufflinks. He didn't notice Victor Reed watching him with an evaluating stare, an old predator analyzing a loud but harmless peacock. Daniel sat quietly, but inside his chest, a memory stirred. A moment from 3 years earlier, one he'd locked away like a fragile object he couldn't bear to break. Evelyn, standing in the Brooks Tech hallway, hair in a messy bun, laptop tucked against her chest, smiling shyly at him after he fixed her broken printer. "You're always helping me," she'd said softly. "Tell me something. What do you want for yourself, Daniel?" He remembered how he almost told her the truth then, about Reed Global, about the empire, about the father who expected him to learn humanity from the ground up. But then he saw fear behind her eyes, the kind of fear that came from growing up without enough. He didn't want her to think he was bragging, so he told her, "I just want to understand people." Now he realized she hadn't understood him at all. From the stage, Evelyn continued greeting guests, her movements graceful, practiced. She had trained for moments like this, being admired, being envied. Yet every time her gaze drifted back to Daniel, something shook inside her, a small, bitter echo. Why does he still look so calm? Why isn't he broken? She kept drinking to cover the discomfort. Her mother approached the stage, dazzling in a dress Evelyn bought for her. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "you look perfect." And Adrian, "Darling, he's exactly the man you deserve." Evelyn nodded, but her mother's praise did what it always did, sent her spiraling back to the memory of her father leaving when she was 9, slamming their front door after screaming he couldn't afford to take care of 2 families. She remembered the hungry nights, the candlelit study sessions, the eviction notice, and most of all, she remembered her mother gripping her shoulders and saying through tears, "Never marry a man who can't secure you. Never." That sentence carved her adulthood like a blade. That sentence pushed her into Adrian's arms and pushed Daniel out of her life. Victor Reed watched Evelyn's posture shift with each sip of champagne, as if she were trying to outrun her own reflection. He leaned slightly toward his son and spoke quietly, his voice a soft rumble. "Son, do you understand now why I asked you to see this with your own eyes?" Daniel swallowed. "I do." "Good," Victor murmured. "People reveal their hearts in how they treat what they believe is beneath them." Across the room, Adrian raised his glass high, calling for attention again. "Everyone," he shouted, "let's toast to choosing the right man." The crowd laughed. Victor's jaw tightened. Daniel's pulse slowed. The moment was approaching, closer than anyone realized, and the wedding was about to take its first real fracture. The band shifted into a slow instrumental as servers carried out trays of food, weaving through tables heavy with gossip, perfume, and the clinking of crystal. Adrian used the lull to pull Evelyn closer for photographs, positioning her like a trophy he wanted the room to admire. Every camera flash illuminated their rehearsed affection, but between flashes, Evelyn's eyes kept drifting toward Daniel, as if afraid he might suddenly disappear or become something she couldn't predict. Adrian noticed. "Why do you keep looking at him?" he whispered, tightening his grip on her waist. "I'm not," she replied too quickly, her voice brittle. Adrian narrowed his eyes, studying her expression. "You sure? Because it feels like unfinished business." The accusation struck something raw inside her. Evelyn forced a smile for the next photo, but the flash ignited another memory. Months before she met Adrian, sitting in a small cafe with Daniel. He'd brought her a cup of tea when she couldn't afford lunch that week, discreetly sliding it to her without a word. She'd watched the steam curl upward, feeling a comfort she didn't understand. She remembered thinking, if kindness were currency, he'd be the richest man alive. Then her mother called, crying about another unpaid bill, and the warmth inside Evelyn froze over. The very next week, she started going out with Adrian. Now watching Daniel's calm composure across the ballroom, she felt that old warmth creeping back, and with it, guilt she refused to name. She turned away sharply. "Let's just enjoy our night," she said to Adrian. But Adrian wasn't the type to let things go. His voice dropped. "If he ever thought he had a chance with you, he was delusional. I made sure he got the message." Evelyn's breath caught. "What did you do?" Adrian smirked. "Back then, nothing major. Just told a few people he was obsessed with you, that he followed you around. Made him look weird enough so you wouldn't think twice." He shrugged casually. "It worked." Evelyn stared at him, stunned. "You said that? About him?" Adrian lifted a brow. "Are you seriously defending the guy? Come on, babe. He's nobody." Across the hall, Victor observed the conversation like a seasoned strategist reading battlefield movements. He noticed Evelyn's expression shift, the beginning of doubt. He noticed Adrian's boastful posture, the same posture Victor had seen in bankrupt CEOs who didn't know they were bankrupt yet. And he noticed Daniel, still composed, but with a quiet heaviness in his breathing that only a father could recognize. Victor leaned toward his son. "You cared for that girl," he murmured. Daniel didn't deny it. "I did. And now?" Daniel's eyes lowered. "Now I see who she chose." Victor's voice softened. "Choice reveals character. Pain reveals growth." Before Daniel could respond, Evelyn's father approached the stage for a speech. The crowd applauded reluctantly. Many guests disliked him, but they respected the money he borrowed loudly enough to seem rich. He tapped the mic. "Tonight," he declared, "my daughter has married into true success." Victor's brows lifted with quiet amusement. Evelyn forced a smile, but her eyes drifted again, uncontrollably, to Daniel. For the first time that night, he looked back at her, not with hurt, not with longing, with something far more unsettling. Recognition. And the recognition made her chest tighten. It was the first crack she felt in her perfect night. The fracture widened when Evelyn's father added proudly, "And I want to thank the Cole family for lifting our Evelyn far above the life she came from." The room clapped. Daniel didn't. Victor didn't. And for the first time, neither did Evelyn. Evelyn's father stepped away from the microphone, waving dramatically for the audience to applaud harder, as if volume alone could rewrite the truth of his own financial failures. The applause rose, but it was uneven. Some clapped politely, others mechanically, and in the center of that uneven sound sat Daniel, motionless, observing the scene with a clarity he hadn't expected to feel tonight. Evelyn tried to focus on her father's proud smile, but her gaze kept drifting back to Daniel's stillness. It wasn't indifference, it was understanding, and that terrified her more than any insult could. She grabbed Adrian's arm for reassurance, but even his warmth felt suddenly insufficient. Victor used the distraction to move closer through the crowd. People parted instinctively, responding to something in his presence they didn't fully understand. Authority that felt older and colder than anything in the room. A few wealthy guests recognized him from magazine covers, though none dared approach. Victor Reed didn't mingle. He evaluated, and he was evaluating everyone. As Victor neared his son's table, Evelyn's father approached him with the overeager grin of a man who'd learned to sniff out expensive suits the way wolves sniff blood. "Victor Reed!" he exclaimed, extending his hand too quickly. "I didn't know someone of your stature was attending this wedding." Victor looked at the man's hand but didn't take it immediately. A faint flicker crossed his face. An old memory of this same man rejecting Daniel years earlier at a Christmas company mixer, assuming he was just a low-level staffer. Victor remembered every detail, not because he held grudges, but because he studied patterns. When he finally shook the man's hand, his grip was firm, unyielding. "I'm here for my son." Evelyn's father blinked, confused. "Your son?" Victor's eyes slid past him toward Daniel. Evelyn's father stiffened. "Wait, him?" He forced an awkward laugh. "You're joking." Victor didn't answer. He didn't need to. Evelyn watched the exchange from across the room, and a chill rolled down her spine. She'd always assumed Daniel came from nothing. He dressed simply, ate alone, never bragged, never pushed, never demanded attention. And she remembered laughing once with coworkers about his thrift store lifestyle. Now the realization that her father, the man who judged everyone by their wallet, was the one sounding foolish made her stomach twist. She leaned closer to Adrian. "Do you know who that man is talking to, my dad?" Adrian shrugged. "Probably some investor. Don't overthink it." But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling creeping under her skin. Something about Victor's calm, precise movements unsettled her. Like he was marking time. Like he'd seen every future mistake already and was just waiting for the final one. A server passed with a tray of champagne. Evelyn grabbed 2 glasses, one for her, one for her nerves. But before she could drink, she caught Daniel watching her father and Victor with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not hurt. Not longing. Something colder. Something final. Adrian sensed her distraction. Babe, I'm starting to think you're obsessed with him. She recoiled. Stop it. But Adrian pressed, smirking. What, did you like him or something? This is our wedding. Focus on me. His voice snapped her back to the present, but not in the way he intended. Instead of grounding her, it pushed her deeper into memory. She remembered Daniel standing by her door months after they drifted apart, returning the umbrella she'd left at work. Rain soaked his shoulders, but he'd smiled softly. You might need this tomorrow, he'd said, voice warm. She had wanted to invite him in. She didn't. Her mother's voice echoed instead. Never marry a man who can't secure you. Now that same voice felt like a blade cutting through her pride. The band shifted again, the melody growing brighter. The wedding planner stepped onto the stage. It's time for the couple's first dance, guests cheered. Evelyn's heart didn't, because across the room, Victor had finally taken a seat beside Daniel. And when Adrian pulled her to the dance floor, she could feel that something irreversible had just begun. The lights dimmed slightly as the band eased into a classic slow melody, and Adrian swept Evelyn onto the dance floor, spinning her into the center like a prize he wanted the entire room to admire. The guests circled around them, forming a shimmering wall of sequins and smiles. Cameras flashed. A dozen phones lifted. It should have been the happiest moment of her life. Instead, Evelyn felt the air thinning, her chest tightening with a discomfort she couldn't name. Adrian's arm slid around her waist. Smile, he whispered. People are watching? She forced one, but her eyes flicked over Adrian's shoulder, straight toward the table where Daniel and Victor sat. The two men didn't dance or clap or record anything. They simply watched, father and son, one calm, one unreadable. Their stillness contrasted sharply with the glittering chaos of the wedding, making Evelyn feel like her entire world was tilting toward them. Adrian noticed her gaze again. Seriously, Evelyn? He muttered, tightening his grip. Why are you staring at him? You're my wife now. She swallowed hard. I wasn't staring. The lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. Then what was that toast about? Adrian pressed. You humiliated him like you had something to prove. Her pulse jumped. I was just trying too hard, Adrian said, spinning her abruptly. Makes you look guilty. The word hit her gut. Guilty. She remembered suddenly and painfully the night she broke things off with Daniel. No affair, no betrayal, just fear disguised as ambition. She remembered the way he'd stood on the sidewalk outside her apartment building, holding a small box she never opened. He had said softly, if this is really what you want, I'll respect it. No anger, no begging, just heartbreak. She'd walked away because her mother's warning echoed too loudly. Never love a man who can't secure you. He'll leave you with nothing. Yet here she was, dancing with Adrian, the man she thought would secure her, and feeling nothing secure inside her at all. The music swelled, guests cheered, but Evelyn saw none of them. She saw only Daniel, his father, and the quiet conversation unfolding between them. Victor leaned slightly toward his son. Daniel listened, jaw tight. A tension built in the space between them, the kind that forms right before a decision is made, one that cannot be undone. Victor's hand rested on a small envelope. Evelyn couldn't see what was inside, but she felt the weight of it from across the room, like a storm cloud gathering above her champagne glass. Adrian dipped her dramatically, shattering her line of sight. Focus on me, he whispered against her cheek. This is our moment. But the moment felt fragile, artificial, like glass balanced on a ledge. When the dance ended, applause erupted. Evelyn tried to steady her breathing. Adrian bowed theatrically. Victor didn't clap. Daniel didn't move. The silence from their table felt louder than the applause. As the couple made their way off the dance floor, Evelyn's father intercepted them with an overexcited grin. You two were magnificent. Hollywood couple. Evelyn, darling, you married up. You married right. The praise tightened something in Evelyn's throat. She had always wanted her father's approval, but now his words felt heavy, like chains she didn't remember agreeing to wear. Thank you, Dad, she murmured. But her eyes drifted again to Daniel. This time he met her gaze fully. A quiet confrontation, a fading tenderness, a truth rising. And Evelyn felt it, the first real tremor of fear. The applause faded as dinner service began, and the ballroom lights softened into a warm amber glow. Silver dome plates were placed before guests. Conversations rose again. Gossip, laughter, the comfortable arrogance of people certain they understood the hierarchy of the room. Only one table remained untouched by that confidence, the one where Daniel and Victor sat. Evelyn noticed it immediately. They hadn't touched their wine, hadn't opened their menus, hadn't moved. The pair looked like two shadows carved into marble, too composed, too quiet. Something about their stillness unsettled her more than any insult could. She tugged gently at Adrian's sleeve. "Can we sit for a moment? I don't feel well." Adrian rolled his eyes. "It's the nerves. You'll be fine." But he guided her to their sweetheart table anyway, dropping into his chair with the satisfied thump of a man who believed the night belonged to him. As Evelyn sat, she glanced one more time toward Daniel. Victor leaned in, speaking to him in a low voice. Whatever he said made Daniel's fingers curl slightly against the tablecloth, a movement so subtle anyone else would have missed it. But Evelyn saw it, and it unlocked another memory she had tried to bury. She remembered Daniel's hand trembling once, years earlier, when he confessed that his greatest fear was letting someone down. They had been sitting outside the office building during their lunch break, sharing a single sandwich because she'd forgotten her wallet, and he insisted on giving her half. She remembered laughing softly and telling him, "You could never let me down." She meant it then. She wondered why she stopped meaning it. Her thoughts were interrupted when her mother approached, sliding into the empty seat beside her. "You're pale," she whispered. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Evelyn said too quickly. Her mother's eyes narrowed, sharp, calculating. "Is it that boy? The one from your old job? Why do you keep looking at him?" Evelyn stiffened. "I'm not. You are, and it better stop." Her mother's voice dipped lower. "Adrian's family is our future. Don't you dare let some sentimental nonsense ruin what we finally have." Evelyn's stomach twisted. Finally have. The words echoed like an old warning, as if success were a fragile loan she had to protect with obedience. Adrian overheard the tail end. "Your mom's right. Don't let that guy distract you. He doesn't matter." Evelyn frowned. "Then why do you keep talking about him?" Adrian shrugged casually. "Because he keeps staring at you." He leaned closer, smirking. "Maybe he regrets losing you. I get it. Who wouldn't? But this..." He gestured at the ballroom, the chandeliers, their sweetheart table. "This is your real life now." Evelyn tried to nod, but her body resisted the lie. Across the room, Daniel finally spoke to his father in a voice soft enough to be lost in the music. "I never wanted tonight to be about revenge." Victor's reply was calm, composed. "It isn't. It's about truth, and truth has its own timing." "Is the timing now?" Daniel asked. Victor lifted the envelope he'd been guarding all evening. "It will be, soon." Evelyn saw the small movement. The envelope raised an inch, and something inside her snapped. Instinct more than logic. Fear more than curiosity. She stood abruptly. Adrian blinked. "Where are you going?" "I need air," she whispered. But she wasn't walking toward the exit. She was walking toward Daniel. And every step tightened the invisible thread pulling her toward the truth she was never supposed to discover. Evelyn moved through the ballroom like someone walking through water. Slow, unsure, every sound muted except the pounding of her heart. She didn't fully understand why her feet were carrying her toward Daniel. Curiosity, guilt, fear, or something older. Something she'd buried the night she convinced herself security mattered more than sincerity. Whatever the reason, she couldn't stop herself. Daniel noticed her approach before she reached him. His posture changed by an inch, an almost imperceptible awareness, but he didn't rise, didn't look away. Victor's gaze shifted between them, measuring every breath she took. Evelyn felt like she was standing on a stage she didn't audition for. She swallowed hard. "Daniel, can we talk?" Adrian's voice sliced across the ballroom before Daniel could answer. "Evelyn!" She flinched. Daniel's eyes softened, not warmly, not coldly, but with an understanding she wished she didn't recognize. He finally stood. "Do you want something from me?" he asked quietly. The question wasn't accusatory. It was gentle. Too gentle. It disarmed her more than anger ever could. Evelyn hesitated, her throat tightening. The years between them compressed into one trembling moment. I just wanted to say, Evelyn! Adrian's footsteps thundered behind her. She closed her eyes briefly, bracing herself. Adrian grabbed her wrist, not violently but with ownership. What the hell are you doing? Adrian, let go, she whispered, more ashamed than afraid. Victor's chair shifted. He didn't get up, didn't speak. But the subtle tilt of his head was enough to warn Adrian that he was no longer dealing with a rival. He was dealing with a danger he didn't yet understand. Adrian scoffed, releasing her wrist but stepping forward, puffing himself up. You think you can interrupt my wife's wedding night? He said to Daniel, mockery in every syllable. You seriously can't take a hint. Daniel stayed calm. She came to me. Yeah, and why would she? Adrian laughed. What could she possibly want from someone like you? The cruelty in that last line triggered something unsteady in Evelyn. She glanced at Daniel, expecting to see pain. Instead, she saw disappointment, a quiet sorrow she remembered from long ago, when he realized she wasn't choosing him. She stepped between them before Adrian could speak again. Please, Adrian, stop making a scene. A scene? He barked. I'm protecting what's mine. Evelyn froze. The word mine scraped through her chest like rusted metal. She wasn't sure why it hurt. Maybe because Daniel had never spoken of her that way, even when he loved her. Victor finally rose from his seat. The shift in energy was immediate, a rippling hush across nearby tables. People turned, sensing a change in the air. Victor Reed didn't need to raise his voice or puff his chest. Authority wrapped around him like an invisible cloak. He approached slowly, each step measured and precise. Your wife, Victor said calmly, is not a possession. Adrian blinked, confused. Who exactly are you? Daniel exhaled, a quiet dread passing through him, because he knew the timing was no longer a question. Victor slipped the envelope from his pocket. Evelyn's heartbeat stuttered. She didn't know what was inside, but her body reacted as if it already knew her life was sitting in that thin paper packet. Victor held Adrian's gaze. I am the man who built the world you believe you understand. Then he turned to Evelyn, his expression softening in a way she didn't expect. And I am the father of the man you thought you knew. The envelope brushed against his palm with a whisper that felt like thunder. Everything stopped. Every guess suddenly alert. Every secret trembling on the edge. And Evelyn realized too late. This wasn't a conversation. This was the beginning of revelation. The ballroom fell into a stunned silence, the kind that felt alive, heavy, waiting, electric. Guests turned toward Victor Reed as though gravity itself had shifted to him. The band faltered mid-note. Camera phones rose like a field of glowing eyes. Evelyn stood frozen between Adrian and Daniel, the envelope hanging in Victor's hand like a loaded weapon. Adrian scoffed, trying to recover his confidence. This is ridiculous. Evelyn, come back here. We don't need to deal with this. Whoever he thinks he is. Victor didn't look at him. His gaze remained on Evelyn, steady, almost gentle. You deserve to understand the truth standing in front of you, he said. The calmness in his voice scared her more than shouting would have. Adrian stepped closer. Truth about what? That this... He jabbed a finger toward Daniel. This nobody has been stalking my wife all night? Evelyn flinched. Daniel didn't. I never stalked her, Daniel replied quietly. And she's not your possession. Adrian laughed harshly. Are you serious? She's my wife. I can say whatever I want. Victor's eyes sharpened, the steel behind his composure flashing like lightning behind a cloud. That attitude, he murmured, is precisely why your world is about to shift. Adrian opened his mouth to retort, but Evelyn touched his arm, trembling. Please stop, she whispered. Just stop for a second. Her voice cracked. It was the first honest sound she'd made all night. The guests felt it. Victor finally lifted the envelope fully, holding it between two fingers. The thick, embossed seal glimmered beneath the chandelier light. Reed Global's crest. Evelyn's breath hitched. She knew that symbol. She'd seen it in corporate emails she never read. On reports she skimmed through. On contracts she assumed belonged to someone untouchable. Victor extended the envelope toward her. "Go on," he said gently. "Open it." Her mother rushed forward, panic twisting her face. "Evelyn, don't. You don't need to entertain whatever this is." But Evelyn's hand rose involuntarily, trembling, as though the truth inside had been waiting years for her fingertips. Before she could touch it, Adrian swatted the envelope away. It slapped to the floor. A collective gasp rose. Victor's expression didn't change, but something else did. An invisible shift, a doorway closing quietly behind him. Daniel's voice dropped, low and disappointed. "Adrian, why would you do that?" "Because nobody disrespects my wife," Adrian snapped, "and nobody interrupts our wedding with some dramatic stunt." Victor turned his head slowly, studying Adrian with an expression that felt ancient. "Young man," he said softly, "you have no idea what you've just dismissed." A server hurried to pick up the envelope, but Victor raised a hand. "Leave it." Evelyn knelt before anyone else could reach it. Her gown pooled on the marble floor as she lifted the envelope with shaking hands. She looked up at Victor, breath trembling, as if silently begging him not to confirm what her body already suspected. "Is this about me?" she whispered. Victor nodded once. Her heart lurched. "Why?" she asked. "Why me?" A quiet sadness crossed Victor's eyes. "Because your story is deeply tied to my son's, whether you knew it or not." Evelyn felt her pulse pounding in her fingertips as she broke the seal. Paper rustled. Adrian tried to snatch it from her, but Daniel stepped in front of him, stopping him with nothing more than presence. No threat, no tension. Just a boundary Adrian knew he wouldn't cross. Evelyn unfolded the documents, her face drained of color, her lips parted, trembling. She turned slowly toward Daniel, the man she once believed was invisible, the man she mocked hours ago, because his name was printed everywhere inside the papers. Owner, chairman, controlling stakeholder, Reed Global, parent holdings, subsidiary management, Brooks Tech Industries, her company, her salary, her entire professional world. Every page whispered the same truth. Daniel owned everything. Her knees weakened, and all she could breathe was one broken word. "Daniel?" The ballroom pulsed with silence, a vacuum so complete it devoured breath and sound alike. Evelyn stood in the center of it, clutching the documents so tightly the edges dug into her palms. Her mind couldn't process the words on the page fast enough. Her eyes kept jumping, searching for some sign that this was a mistake, some fine print, some footnote, some reason the universe wasn't tilting beneath her feet. But every page told the same truth. Daniel Reed was the one she had underestimated. Daniel Reed was the man behind her entire career. Daniel Reed was the man she mocked in front of everyone she wanted to impress. Her lips trembled. "This can't be real." Daniel didn't move toward her, didn't try to comfort her. His face remained calm, gentle even, but there was a distance in his eyes now, a distance she recognized too well. The same distance she saw the night she broke his heart. The night she closed the door on the man who brought her an umbrella, the man who gave her his sandwich, the man who looked at her like she was more than her wounds. Evelyn's mother stepped forward, voice shrill with panic. "These papers prove nothing. Anyone can print." Victor raised a hand, silencing her effortlessly. "These are originals, signed, verified, registered. The ink on the last page is from 3 months ago." 3 months. That meant Daniel had signed off on her department's funding while she was casually mocking him in the break room. He had approved her travel budget, her promotion, her salary increase, and he said nothing. Evelyn felt a crushing weight settle on her shoulders. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, looking at Daniel. "Why didn't you ever say who you were?" His reply was quiet, steady. "Because I didn't want you to choose me for what I have." A memory slammed into her, sitting in his car during a rainy evening after working late, laughing over cheap takeout, telling him, "You always make me feel safe." She remembered the warmth, the sincerity, the possibility, and how she destroyed it, not because she didn't care, but because she was terrified to trust kindness. Adrian stepped forward, voice cracking with anger. This is insane. This whole charade, him pretending to be poor, this is manipulation. He played you, Evelyn. Evelyn stared at Adrian, shocked at the desperation leaking through his bravado. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He didn't pretend to be poor. He just didn't flaunt anything. Adrian scoffed. So what? We're supposed to bow down to him because he's some rich kid? Victor stepped between them. Not because he's rich, because he earned his place in the world. His eyes narrowed. And because he never used power to belittle anyone. The contrast landed like a slap. Adrian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Evelyn closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the truth. Daniel never looked down on her. Daniel never mocked her. Daniel never used her fears against her, not like Adrian did. Her father grabbed her arm, whispering harshly, "Don't you dare ruin this marriage. You finally made it. Don't you walk away from wealth." But for the first time in her life, Evelyn realized she didn't actually feel wealthy. She felt trapped. She looked back at Daniel, tears filling her eyes. You owned the company I worked for, the company I built my whole life around, and I never even knew. Daniel exhaled slowly. Because your life wasn't meant to revolve around a company, Evelyn. He held her gaze, soft but unshaken. It was supposed to revolve around who you chose to be. Everything inside her broke. Her father yanked her arm again. Evelyn! She pulled away from him. For the first time in years, her voice barely rose above a whisper, but the entire ballroom heard it. I think I chose wrong. The words hung in the air like a confession, a collapse, a beginning, and the wedding began to crumble from the inside out. The moment Evelyn whispered, I think I chose wrong, the ballroom erupted, not with noise, but with a chilling, absolute stillness. It felt as though the chandeliers themselves were holding their breath. Adrian stared at her, stunned, as though he'd been slapped in front of the entire world. What did you just say? He whispered, voice cracking. Evelyn didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Daniel, as if he were the only steady thing in a room spinning off its axis. Adrian's shock turned quickly to rage. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to embarrass me at our wedding because some guy with a trust fund. Victor's voice cut him off, quiet but sharp enough to stop him mid-sentence. My son is not defined by his trust fund. He stepped forward with a presence that swallowed the room. But you are defined by your arrogance. The words hit harder than a shout. Adrian's father pushed through the crowd, face pale. Victor, wait. Let's discuss. Victor didn't even look at him. While your son was busy humiliating others, mine spent 3 years working at ground level to understand the people whose lives his decisions affect. That is why he is ready to inherit Reed Global. His gaze cooled. And that is why your family is not. A murmur rippled across the ballroom. Adrian stepped back as though the floor itself were cracking beneath him. What are you saying? Victor's eyes sharpened. Every contract your father's company has with Reed Global is terminated effective immediately. Gasps exploded. Adrian's father's breath hitched like someone drowning. You can't do that, Victor. That will ruin us. Victor's tone was calm, merciless. Integrity ruins no one. Only choices do. Adrian's world collapsed in that single instant, the weight of consequences crashing down like falling stone. He turned desperately to Evelyn, gripping her shoulders. Say something. Tell him not to do this. Evelyn looked at him with tears streaming silently down her cheeks. You laughed at him. You lied about him. You mocked him for having nothing, when he was the only one who ever offered me everything that mattered. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering through him. Not because he loved her still, but because he mourned what they could have been before fear poisoned it. Adrian growled, voice raw. Daniel, you're doing this because she wants you. Admit it. Daniel opened his eyes, calm as snowfall. No, I'm not doing this for her. Or for you. He stepped forward, lifting his chin. I'm doing this because your family built its success on intimidation, manipulation, and disrespect. My father is simply correcting what should never have been tolerated. It wasn't anger. It wasn't vengeance. It was truth. Adrian swung at him, one last desperate act. Daniel caught his wrist with quiet precision, holding it effortlessly. "Don't," he whispered. Security rushed forward, pulling Adrian back as guests scattered. Evelyn's mother clung to her daughter. "Don't let go of Adrian. Wealth doesn't come twice." Evelyn gently removed her mother's hands. Her voice broke. "Then maybe I never had wealth to begin with." She turned to Daniel, trembling. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For not seeing you. For running. For choosing wrong." Daniel's eyes softened with a bittersweet ache. "You chose what you thought would protect you," he said quietly. "But sometimes protection becomes another form of prison." She reached for him, with hope, with regret, with longing. Daniel stepped back. Evelyn froze, breath catching. "I forgave you long ago," he said softly, "but forgiveness is not a bridge to old roads." A sob escaped her. "Daniel, please." He offered her a sad, gentle smile. "Evelyn, we were a chapter, not a destiny." Victor placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Ready?" Daniel nodded. They turned to leave. Adrian collapsed into a chair. Father ruined, marriage shattered. Evelyn dropped to her knees, clutching the documents, the truth she'd begged for too late. The ballroom watched the quiet destruction unfold, stunned, breathless. Daniel walked out without anger, without pride, just peace. And that peace was what destroyed them all.